person is going to follow the way of his friend. So you have to be careful.
The most important thing in raising our kids is not following our opinions or other opinions.
One of the qualities you have to look in the man, that he will look after you.
And the girl has to pay the money. This is exactly what happens.
This is unmanly.
And he needs to have a salary.
With religious commitment is that a lot of the Muslims nowadays don't.
This is the problem with Shia Google, is that the authentic and the non-authentic come up when you type it in.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. All praise belongs to Allah, and may His peace and blessings be upon His Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I welcome you, dear viewers, to this episode where we are asking the question, what is missing in our schools? Now with us, we have our dear shuyukh. We have Sheikh Mamdouh Mohamed from the USA, Sheikh Abdul Bari Yahya from the USA, and Sheikh Abdur Raheem Mccarthy from the USA. Now, I suppose we're blessed to have three people who are educators. You all have experience in Islamic education, secular education. It's something that we all know about, and myself, I've studied education. So I hope, inshallah, that we're going to be able to speak from experience about exactly what we need in our schools. Now, I'm going to mention that, in the West, we do have, alhamdulillah, Islamic schools. However, sometimes this name Islamic is sometimes just a title, because
I think maybe if you say Muslim schools, because we can't say the ones who are studying there are non-Muslims, because they're still Muslim. But there's not too much Islam going on in those schools.
So what's lacking? From your experience, looking at the schools, for example, in the USA or wherever else you've taught, what is lacking from the Islamic standards and etiquettes in these schools? What do we need? What are the utmost concerns?
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam wa rasulillah. The topic of the school is a very important topic, something we're really in need of. And I don't like to be negative when I answer things. I always like to be positive. But the first thing that popped into my mind when you asked the question was everything. What is needed,
This is too much.
Yeah. There might be a lot of good, alhamdulillah, that we have, but we still have a long way to go when it comes to education. And I think if we bounce back a little bit to some other episodes when we talked about modernism, pros and cons, I think the modern education system, even though there is some good when it comes to creativity and if it's implemented properly, however, there's a lot of cons in it as well. And this is what we need to learn to do as Muslims, is to be able to weed out what is not suitable for us. That doesn't mean everything that comes from the West now, because the modern education systems are coming from the West, the Western world. So that doesn't mean everything is bad, and there's a lot of good in it. But there are things that are not suitable for us. So we need to be able to weed those things out. And we need to be able to combine, once again, between our religion and between the modern education system if we're going to have our schools be successful.
So even just to begin with, when we say Islamic school, and you've said now you have a Western school or a secular school or public school, we say that we prefer to send our children to an Islamic school. Now, judging by the schools that we have at the moment, knowing what's in them, I'm going to ask you, Sheikh Mamdouh, first of all, why do parents want to send them to an Islamic school as opposed to a public school? What's in it for us?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. There's something in the background of every Muslim. These verses and these hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And one of these hadith talks about the fitrah, the original nature that every newborn baby was born with it. So one of the things that one of our jobs as parents, one of our jobs as teachers, one of our jobs as Muslims is to do our best to maintain the original fitrah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created in our children and created in us as well. So this is one of the main jobs that for us is to maintain this fitrah. Otherwise, if we don't maintain it, it will change this fitrah, which is the most dangerous thing for the children. And I think most of the deviation that we see is because this fitrah has changed. It's how to maintain that these hearts and these souls that were born on the fitrah, that means knowing that there is God. They were programmed or pre-programmed to worship Allah and to know Allah. And now we want to maintain this. And when the parents send their children to non-Islamic schools or secular school or liberal school, whatever name they can call it, yes, you'll find the focus is on the other direction. And that's why they found that after few weeks, and parents would start making this comment, my kids has changed, and they have changed it into the wrong direction. And I want to do something, I want to save my children. So they try to take them to the Islamic school, hoping that in these Islamic schools that they would make a good balance, as the Sheikh said.
That's what you find in a lot of Islamic schools, that the waiting list, and like in Western countries like this, the waiting list is so long. And you mentioned this in your guys' school the other day.
Yeah.
It's so long, and you might even find a lot of the parents in themselves are not always like practicing Muslims themselves.
Yeah.
But they want for them kids, they know, for example, the path they're on is not good. They don't want their kids to be on the same path. They want to try them to at least be on some middle grounds. They don't want them to be too far astray. So they want to get their kids in this environment as well.
Even if the parents are not good.
Yes,
please.
I think, especially in the West, you have the public schools. In many aspects, you know, they're very, very good when it comes to maybe academics and so forth. Even that, of course, is questionable even now. But generally, it most depends on the place and the area, and most of the time, it's generally okay. What's lacking in the public schools are the teachings of morals and manners and values that maybe the parents who did not or were not born in the West, and they were used to different types of treatment, how they used to treat their parents, and they're not seeing that in their children. And so they see that there's a change there, something's happened. And of course, it's generally due to the education system, and so generally they tend to bring them back. But one problem that we do have in some of the schools is that you have very, very good parents who want the best for their children. And so they have tried their very best to give their children the best education, teach them the best manners, etiquettes and morals, and everything else that they're able to give them. And so these kids are very, very good kids. And then you have another group of parents who are negligent, we could say, maybe concerning raising their children. And so they become actually so bad that the public schools have pretty much rejected. And they have no option except to send them to Islamic schools, hoping that maybe they could correct their own mistakes to cover them up.
This is a problem that a lot of brothers have complained to me in the West, is that in the Islamic schools, you have these people, I don't want to call them rejects, but the ones who have really gone astray, really taken the wrong path. Like you say, even in public schools, not just from an Islamic standpoint.
Yeah, the public schools have rejected them
as well. So these guys are really bad.
Yeah.
So you imagine when they put, and it's not like, you know, as Muslims, we're not angels either, and our kids aren't either. Everybody has issues. Beginning of the episode, I said, hey, let's say Muslim schools and not Islamic schools. Because a lot that's going on in these schools, there's not too much about Islam going on there.
Fortunately, so I remember actually teaching a class once, and for the first half of the year, I was blessed to have the most beautiful children. This was a volunteer class that I was teaching. We'd do it 3 times a week. All of the kids were perfect, mashallah. Religious families, you know, good manners. In the second half of the year, one child was put in the class. And this child, as soon as I saw the parents, I mean, we're not here to judge people, but no hijab, you know, very loud, spanking her kid, you know, and even the kid was, you know, aggressive towards the mother. I said, this doesn't look good. He was put into our classroom. Within a week, the whole classroom had become corrupt and we couldn't teach anymore. You see what one child had done. And of course, that child was young. He was 7 years old, but he had already adopted what the parents had done. And the mother actually said, the reason why I'm sending here is because I failed, I want you to fix him. The reality is, you failed, and now he's corrupting the classroom. This is a massive, massive issue, and this is why I've seen in many of the Islamic schools, the waiting lists are so long that what they do is they interview the parents before they even see the child. And they look at them, do you pray? No, you're rejected.
And the brothers in India, in their school, they're very strict on this, on meeting with the parents and seeing, and they mentioned them very, very clearly. And that is, we cannot build something in the day that you corrupt at night. So if the household and the parents are corrupt, then obviously that's going to have the major effect on the children as well. And so this is something very important. We're talking about an Islamic school. It has to really, really be Islamic. So we're talking about, you know, future leaders we talked about in the past as well. in our homes. The future leaders, when they come from a school like this, you're going to see the effect it's going to have on the society. And me personally, I mean, we don't have enough Islamic schools now to have hospitals. Now, what these people are looking for is a hospital for a cure, you know, not something for a physical cure, but the mental and the spiritual cure that they need.
That's why the schools have counselors. Yes.
I think another thing is, another problem that we have is, you know, you mentioned about the parents or the children who are really, really bad, and their parents really need to send their children somewhere where they could be taught, and maybe we can correct the situation. Many times, of course, we don't want them corrupting other children, but we also have to find an alternative for these kids, also these children.
Definitely so.
I mean, we can't just, as Muslims, how can you just kick somebody out who really wants, you know, their children to be good?
And looking at that,
It is a tricky one. It's a tricky one because you don't really know which way to go.
Let me go back to what is missing. But
before we do go with that, inshallah, we're going to go to a very short break, and we're going to take a look at exactly what we can do to have a holistic approach to make sure that we are covering the whole community, especially the ones who might have lacked, you know, the proper upbringing. So inshallah, dear viewers, we're going to go to a very short break. So do stay tuned. Inshallah, we'll be back after a very short moment. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back, dear viewers. We are here with our dear Shaykh discussing the topic, what is missing in our Islamic schools? Now, before the break, we were looking at the idea that we have, you know, the ideal school that we want to have, and sometimes you might have a child whose family has not raised this child properly. So you find that there's something lacking, and as you mentioned, Shaykh Abdul Bari, the solution is not necessarily just to kick them out. I mean, it might suit one school, but then we have to ask as a community, you know, what are we doing to address this person's needs? I think you were mentioning something, Sheikh Mamdouh, continuing on from this.
now we are talking about not just the child as a student, but now we're talking about the whole family. And that's why I like the example that you mentioned, that they used to interview the parents themselves. In addition to interviewing the parents themselves, we need to involve them in the student's life. We need to get some commitment when we accept this child that the parents would be involved in a certain degree. They would attend some class, perhaps. They would attend all the meetings that are necessary. They would be involved in discussing the IPA of the student or his future. What are the areas that he needs to be focused on, and all these things. So the involvement of the parents, and the research proves that the more the parents are involved in the education of their children, the better the students at school.
From your experience, is this something you've seen, that when the parents are more involved, the child improves?
Oh yeah, not just experience, I'm telling you about research. And research is usually much better than experience. When we talk about your experience, we can talk about individual experience. Than personal experience, a collective experience. We work at school and we are 20 teachers and we found out of experience such and such. So this collective experience is better than the personal experience. And then the research is much better than this, because the research tells us that it studied hundreds of cases and came up with these results. So they took my personal experience and his personal, and they put it in a neutral way, and they could get a data that's beneficial and can be generalized. So the research is better than collective experience. Collective experience is better than individual experience. And this is something really we need to pay attention. So involving the parents into the school is something very important.
This is something lacking, we can say.
It is, although it is not the first priority or the second priority, but it is lacking. And we need to tell people, we need to tell schools, you want to accept children, you need some commitment from the parents to come to the school. And in this way, the parents are not just involved in the education of children, they are learning. They are learning different ways from the teachers who teach their children. And that's why there are some schools you find that this classroom, and there's another sub-classroom behind it with some windows where they can observe their kids, how they are doing in the class, how they are much talking, or they can identify some of the problems by observing their children. So it's a practical thing that's done in some schools. But anyway, end of my talk here. about this particular issue is that we want parents to be involved. We want parents to be involved even in evaluating the teachers. Parents should have a say in that. Because, yes, and we need the teachers also to be trained how to accept some guests on daily basis in their classrooms, because yes, they need to improve themselves. They need to get the opinion of others so they can evaluate. Also, we need the opinion of the parents in the curriculum, because in many countries, when the children are put into a school, there's some curriculum, whether it's positive or negative, but anyway, at least from an Islamic perspective, they would have a say. Here, you did not cover this, or you covered them incorrectly, and this part of it would hurt the feeling of our children because they are Muslims. So in this way, the teacher can make some modification to, so study or help their children study, but in the school itself. So now when you see this, you are part of the problem. Parents are part of the problem because...
And part of the solution.
And part of the solution. Exactly. We want them to be part of the solution.
Definitely so. No,
I think it only helps with the involvement of the parents. If the parents all are involved in, just consultation with the teachers and also the administrators, it's only going to help, because the parents will also help to see the performances of the teacher, just like you mentioned. And one of the biggest problems that we do have in the schools, in Islamic schools, is that our teachers they might be in an Islamic school, but they're not really practicing Muslims sometimes. And so this gives the child, who's learning maybe math, and then the Islamic school teacher comes and the teacher is teaching the child to do certain things, to apply this sunnah and so forth. But then maybe the homeroom teacher is not even applying that which the teacher is teaching, and so you get this contradiction in the child's mind, and it's what's going on.
I've actually seen some schools with non-Muslim teachers. Non-Muslim teachers that actually tell the children, you shouldn't be praying. Now, if you were in this situation, if you knew, for example, Sheikh Abdur Raheem, if you knew your child was in a school where there were non-Muslim teachers who were actively telling the children, don't pray, don't do this, what would you do? I mean, a lot of parents think that they're powerless, that they've got nobody to speak to. What are their options?
Speaking of the parents, the problem and the cure, as we said, or the problem and the solution, that, subhanAllah, a lot of times, I received a phone call just last week from a sister who is an Islamic studies teacher in a school, and it has a lot of Muslims, a lot of non-Muslims, but it's obviously not Islamic. And the school wants to improve its Islamic studies department because it wants to get a better rating from the government in the school. But she was telling me one of the problems that she faces is that a lot of the parents themselves come and request that their kids don't even study Islamic studies. They say because this is wasting their time.
And this is Muslim parents.
They're from a Muslim background anyways.
SubhanAllah.
So now they're saying that it's wasting their time, and we want them to concentrate, because for example, it's British curriculum school, we want them to get higher grades on their IGCSE exams in grade 11. So they need to focus. They're saying now from grade 7, they're coming and complaining that we don't want Islamic studies for them. They'll learn when they get older,
Okay, perhaps we're not focusing on this, but we would say that if the school has very clear vision and mission, and this vision and mission is explained to the parents.
Yes, definitely.
From the first day they join the school, so the
issues. We have a lot of issues we want to talk about. I think a lot of the times, if you notice, a lot of times we talk about, we've gone to the parents. And the parents, a lot of times, they are the problem. I don't want to go too much more in detail on some other subjects, definitely. But I'll give you just one more quick example, and perhaps we can go on to something else. And that is, when I graduated from the University of Medina, I went back to Sudan for some time. I was teaching there. It was a very good experience. I was teaching in also British curriculum school, and I was teaching Islamic studies. But the kids who were coming back, they were coming back from Canada, from the UK, the US. And what it was, as you had mentioned in the beginning, that when they saw they had gone astray, they were trying to save their kids, because they were too lackadaisical themselves, not paying attention to their children. All of a sudden they found their children have gone really astray, really far from Islam, really far from the custom. So they want to try to bring them back a little bit. So a lot goes back to the parents. And I think the role of the parents, that's one of the things where I have with success with the school I'm at, is the parents, they're involved. If you ask them to get involved, they're right there to make sure the kid goes where he needs to go. So the parents, and we say, what is missing in our schools? The role of the parents, no doubt, this is probably the key and one of the most important
It's one of the keys, yeah.
Sometimes you have some schools, though, the administrators, they don't involve the parents. And so this is something that has to be also corrected.
The important point with this, because as Sheikh Abdur Raheem was saying, that you find some schools who are motivated and they say, this is our goal. Then you have some, like you've said, who shut the parents out. They might not be giving the best education. I guess what a lot of parents sometimes don't realize, there's a very good documentary that was made in the US, I think it was called Waiting for Superman. And the whole point of this is saying to the parents that you don't just send your child to the nearest school. You send your child to the best school. What's the best school? You have to get out and research.
Yes.
Make sure that you are getting out. And this is, one of the things that we can say to parents to do. I mean, you might live in a place where there's only one Islamic school. You might live in one where there's 10. You want to make sure that you're getting the best.
Yeah, because we have to look at it even from the perspective of investment. This is the best investment you are making in your life. You are investing in your children. You want your children to be the best human beings. So you need to make the research. You need to be involved. And that's why don't go to the school that's close to you, I said, but you have to study the school first. You have to meet the people who are in charge. So if you know that a school that you mentioned that the administrators don't involve the parents, oh, this is not the right school for me. I want a school that I have a say and my child have a say. So we need to educate parents about this and be very, pay attention to this, particularly the parents who are capable of doing this.
On the other extreme, where the parents are always trying to get involved in everything. This was a problem also.
The school has the guidelines, and all the parents should see these guidelines. And when they enroll their students in this school, they agreed on this. So they know exactly their role, where they are involved, where they are not involved, when they are involved. So they know all these details, and this would make sense. In the USA, Islamic schools or Muslim schools, I like this term, that has a lot of Muslims, but it doesn't necessarily follow Islam, you would find very, very bad practices from the parents. Most of these schools live on fundraising. And you would find to a degree that a parent would come and would say that if the school does not do this and this and this to my child, I will not pay you money. And this is very negative image for a Muslim. You are not paying the school this money. You are paying this money for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As an investment, you are paying it for the sake of Allah.
The children will come after your children as well for the ummah.
Sometimes this causes a lot of problems within the school.
It does?
I know some schools where the person who is supporting the school is very wealthy, but his child, his son is very, very bad.
Like the child that you mentioned.
That child needs to be expelled. But you can't expel that child because he's supporting the school so much. But he's messing up the whole classroom, maybe.
I've seen this myself.
That's also problematic. Also.
It's definitely an issue. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. May Allah reward you all for joining us and contributing to the discussion. And may Allah reward you, dear viewers, for joining us. We hope that you've benefited from the program. And we hope, inshallah, that you'll join us in our coming episodes. Until then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.